Hey everybody, Andrew Ferguson from Kensington Wine Market here. We've got a couple of amazing new casks from Gordon MacPhail that I wanted to share with you. Um, we've been really lucky over the years. Gordon MacPhail's been an incredible partner for us, going back to the very first cask we ever bottled. A 1960 Strath Isla, 46 years old, dark as Coke. It all started there, and 150 plus single casks and 17 odd years later, we've got a couple of other gems here for you. We have a 2000 Glen Scotia and we have a 1997. I'm pretty sure it's 97. Well, that's the Glen Scotia. That's the Balblair, 1997. That's what happens when everything's facing away from you. Gorgeous casks, both in their own right. I'm going to crack them open, give them a little taste, share with you here. So let's start off with the Glen Scotia. Glen Scotia is a Campbellton distillery, as I'm sure many of you are aware. We've bottled a Glen Scotia before. It was an official bottling of Glen Scotia. It was a really dirty, oily, sherried, peaty Glen Scotia. This one's a little different. It's that lighter, fruitier style of Glen Scotia. It's still Campbelltown. It's got that Campbellton funk. It's got an oily body to it, as almost every bottling of Glen Scotia does. But it's straight refill American oak, a single refill American oak, hogshead to be specific, 2000 vintage cask 325, 22 years of age, 56.9%. And it's a beauty. So there we go. Got it in glass. One of the things I love about this particular distillery is, especially going back more than 10 years, Glen Scotia was really just limping along, very small amounts of production. For a period, probably around when this was made, it was being operated only a couple of months a year. At times, the folk from Springbank Distillery in their off season were actually going down to Glen Scotia and distilling for them. There was no full-time presence there. In fact, the first time I went to Glen Scotia while visiting Springbank, this would be around 2006, we basically just walked into it with the Springbank folk. It wasn't locked. It wasn't blocked up. It was just, we were able to go in and kind of have a wander around at our leisure, which was sort of incredible. Slightly different times. Springbank's now obviously very hard to get. Glen Scotia is becoming harder and harder to get as well, which makes this cask, all the more special for us, the fact that Gordon MacPhail was willing to part with it. Because of those long fermentations, due to, maybe working only a couple of days a week or a couple of shifts a week, not running 24/7, certainly like a lot of distilleries were in the 2010s, meant, those longer fermentations give you a much fruitier estery spirit once it gets through the distillation. And Glen Scotia also, you have varying peating levels. And sometimes you get like a really dirty Glen Scotia. Sometimes you'll get a much cleaner one, but it's almost always oily. And as it gets older, you start to see those nice tropical tones come through. And I think that's what you're starting to get here. There's some lovely vanilla. It's maritime, salted caramel tones coming through. Some notes of toasted almonds on the nose there as well. Some nice citrus. When we get to the palate, oh man, that's pretty. That's my first dram of the day, which, it's almost 5:30 here, so I've waited a little while, but no sharpness, no burn, a little bit of warmth, which you'd expect for cask strength at 56. Was that 56.9? 56.9%. It's pretty, it's soft, it's elegant. I don't think it needs a drop of water. You could always put one in there if that's your preference, but I don't think it needs it. And the price on this is phenomenal too. I should have looked that up before I started recording this video, but I think it's somewhere in the 260, 270 range. For 22-year-old Glen Scotia, that is a screaming deal. Very pretty. That's not all we have. Obviously, I've got this other bottle over here, the Balblair 1997. Gordon MacPhail has bottled some absolutely stellar Balblair over the years, including some older vintages of it. We saw a lot of mid-90s sherried Balblair back in the day under the cask strength line, the old Gordon MacPhail cask strength line, which was lovely. And to be given a chance to bottle A fairly actively sherried Balblair is quite cool, but this is a refill cask, a refill sherry hogshead cask 1870, distilled in 1997. And what have we got here? 58.3%, 24 years of age. If I didn't mention it, the Glen Scotia is 22. How often do you see 20-something Glen Scotia these days? Almost never is the only answer to that question. The Balblair, right off the bat, there's some nice leathery, kind of dunnage notes, toasty, chocolatey, almost like coffee bean dunnage notes from it. But as you get into it, it starts to get into some Christmas cake tones. For refill sherry, it's fairly active. It's not overly sherried, but there's a nice sherried richness to it on the nose. On the palate, warming, nutty, some nice spice tones in there, a little bit of leather and chocolate, kind of that classic Christmas cake, candied fruit, chocolatey profile to it. And as you get into it, you start to see some of those little bit more delicate, little bit more tropical fruits, a bit of a mango, maybe some papaya coming through underneath. Oh, absolutely beautiful. This is, if my memory serves, our first ever exclusive single cask of Balblair. We've never had the fortune of doing an official one, but fingers crossed that might happen someday. We have done a couple of Old Pultneys. Balblair is a Highland distillery located a little bit north of Inverness, about 40 minutes north, just a little bit past Glenmorangie, way up there in the Tane area, Caithness and Sutherland part of Scotland. The distillery is a beautiful distillery. It's one of the oldest still operating, and the buildings have got this beautiful old stone exterior to them. Well worth a visit if you're up in the area there. But 24-year-old Balblair, around $300. Again, I should know the price off the top of my head, but I don't because I just started recording this. But compared to the official bottling of Balblair 25, which is a nice bottle and 46% if I remember correctly, for that one you're looking closer to $750, $800 a bottle. So less than half the price for a 24-year-old gorgeous single cask of Balblair, bottled exclusively for your friends at Kensington Wine Market. Both of these are limited. The Glen Scotia yielded, but where is it here? 228 bottles, and the Balblair was only 214 bottles. And that might sound like a lot, but at this moment, we are a little over halfway through both casks, and they've only been in shop now for 2 weeks. In fact, it's been 2 weeks exactly today that these arrived in store. Both beautiful gems, both exclusive to Kensington Wine Market. And we want to say a huge thank you to our friends at Authentic Wine and Spirits, who are the importers, but also our friends at Gordon MacPhail, a wonderful family-run business that sees the value in working with small independent retailers such as ourselves. So whether you want something a little coastal, tropical, and just a touch oily with a little bit of funk, or something a bit more classic sherry cask, neither of these will disappoint. So, slange.